Senate Bill 1300. Representative Okonowitz, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your time today, you and the committee. For the record, Doug Okonowitz, Legislative District 3, Idaho State Senate. For your consideration today, we've got Senate Bill 1300, and what this legislation does is it seeks to appoint and treat the three directors for the Idaho Departments of Fish and Game, Parks and Recreation, and Transportation in a fashion that's consistent with our other state agencies. Presently, these three directors are hired and serve at the pleasure of their respective boards, and therefore have never been subject to Senate confirmation or gubernatorial appointment. This is important because the current practice is at odds with both the laws and customs of, that flow from the Appointments Clause of Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. In fact, our founders strongly argued the importance of the executive making appointments for cabinet-level positions such as these in tandem with the advice and consent of the Senate. For example, in Federalist 76 and 77, Hamilton asserts that the discernment of an individual in selecting an appointment is superior to a selection by a committee, as is currently done by the boards for these three agencies in question today. He also argues that it's especially true when the executive nomination is subject to confirmation by the Senate. He says, a well-directed man by a single understanding cannot be distracted and warped by that diversity of views, feelings, and interests, which frequently distract and warp the resolutions of a collective body. He goes on to criticize the idea of a small body selecting appointees for a number of reasons, including the natural desire of people wanting to get along and thereby compromising their selection such that the best person of the job may be set aside in favor of maintaining friendships or in response to internal group intrigues. But most of all, he disliked the backroom nature of the process of appointment by a small group. Excuse me. When compared to the very public nomination by the executive, that's then subject to an independent Senate's public review, public interviews, public debates on that nominee's qualifications prior to making a very public vote, which all result in a meaningful check on the executive as well as a critical and independent second look at a candidate. The founders put great stock in this two-step and very open public appointment process. The current system we have in place for these three directors not only lacks the benefit of an independent second look at a nominee, it lacks the constitutionally relevant and important check by the legislative branch on the executive as found in that Appointments Clause in Article 2, Section 2. Senate Bill 1300 will simply bring these three agency heads properly in line with our other agencies. It'll make the appointment process more rigorous, bring that process out of the shadows and into the public eye, consistent with how we treat our other cabinet-level agency heads. The directors will still report to their respective boards, and the boards will retain all of their other current powers, including the power to set budgets, rulemaking, planning roads, setting hunting and fishing seasons, investing in new lands for parks, and so on. We have multiple other agencies like this whose directors and board members are both appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate, and they include the Department of Education, DEQ, and pardon and paroles, for example. I also think that the structure found in Senate Bill 1300 is going to improve the working relationship between these agencies and the legislature. From time to time, we've experienced frustrations when dealing with what are essentially autonomous agency heads. However, it's important to say that I think those tensions are really not the fault of the directors, the boards, or the members of the legislature, but it's just a natural byproduct of the current ill-designed structure. We've got three great directors who I think will work better with the legislature going forward once we correct that structural problem, which has often resulted in agencies encroaching on the legislature's policy-making authority. Now, I have examples of that, but I don't want to take too much time today. I know it's Friday and we're moving along, so I'm going to save that for later in case somebody wants to hear one or two of those examples. In closing, I know that, like all of you, I've been receiving, or been really inundated with a lot of emails and phone calls claiming that passage of Senate Bill 1300 will result in a breach of the Hariman Park Agreement. And that's just not true. Multiple analyses from different attorneys in the Attorney General's office, as well as Legislative Counsel, all agree that the changes in this bill will have absolutely no effect on that agreement. Last week, I emailed all of you a copy of the most recent analysis that was authored by Elizabeth Bowen, who, as you all know, is the Idaho Legislature's independent and nonpartisan attorney. After an immense amount of legal research, she concluded that Senate Bill 1300 simply doesn't violate the Hariman Agreement. Her findings are consistent with all of the AGE office's earlier work. You can see her conclusions for yourselves in the hard copy that's been provided for you today. And in the conclusion on the last page, she says, there's no inherent conflict between the provisions of SB 1300 and the instruments that conveyed Hariman State Park to the state of Idaho. While the instruments provided selection criteria for park service personnel, The instruments did not specify a selection process or a selection authority. What matters for the purposes of the conveyance instruments is not who selects Park Service personnel or the process by which they are selected, but whether they are selected on the basis of merit. As long as the director of the Department of Parks and Rec is appointed based on merit, the state has complied with the conveyance instruments. Lastly, the constitutionally supported approach of gubernatorial appointment and Senate confirmation will not only make the appointment process more open to the public than it currently is, it will also provide two separate and independent looks at a nominee, making it much less likely that a director appointed to Parks and Recreation would be someone who could potentially violate the Hariman Agreement as compared to how that appointment is presently handled, which is, as you know, by a single entity, absent the all-important second step of Senate review and confirmation. And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Okonowitz. Are there questions for Senator Okonowitz? Representative Scott.
I move that we send Senate Bill 1300 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Committee, we do have a motion to send Senate Bill 1300 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. We do have a number of folks signed up to testify. Just so for the edification of the committee, the folks watching online, the chair intends to take testimony and discussion on this until 10 a.m. this morning, at which time we will have you come back and wrap it up, and we'll take action on the bill today. Are there further questions? Representative Mickelson.
Yeah, Senator Okonowitz and Mr. Chairman, I heard you comment about how this is a superior process because the Senate actually looks out and approves those confirmations. So my question becomes then, why hasn't the Senate reappointed somebody that's supposed to be a tax commissioner and let that sit out for the previous 3 years? So if we're supposed to believe that this is such a superior process, that the Senate has the opportunity to do this, why aren't they exerting their control and demanding to have that confirmation? So you sit there and you say this, so what tools do you guys have to even make sure that you will actually confirm these people if they just kind of hang out there in limbo?
Senator Okonowitz.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Mickelson, I can't speak to that case specifically because I'm not on the germane committee for that appointee. The fact that they weren't confirmed probably means that the committee members didn't think they should be. But I can only conjecture on the reasons for why that person wasn't confirmed.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, if you'd like to follow, sure.
So then the question becomes is what processes or what law is in place to make sure as we move forward, if the governor doesn't send a name down, that they just don't have an acting director for into perpetuity? Because is there a law to protect the citizens of this state and our legislature that doesn't happen?
Senator Okonowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Mickelson, yeah, there is a law that says that all of those appointees have to be confirmed by the Senate after receiving advice and consent of the Senate. I don't believe they can move forward in perpetuity. Now, perhaps the one you're speaking of doesn't fall under the advice and consent of the Senate. I don't know why that one is an outlier. I'm not on that committee, the germane committee for that appointee.
All right. Seeing no further questions, we're going to move to public testimony. Chairman always likes to take in person first, so Thomas Dixon.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tom Dixon. I'm a grandson of Roland and Gladys Hariman. And the Roland Hariman and his brother Averill Hariman made a gift to the people of the state of Idaho of the railroad ranch on December of 1961. This was approved and promoted by then Governor Smiley. The agreement is the state agreed to accept the gift, establish a state park subject to the following conditions. Section 4B, the people of the state of Idaho acting by and through the legislature of Idaho will establish pursuant to law professional staffed career park service whose personnel shall be chosen on the basis of merit alone and which shall be administered under merit system procedures for personnel administration, and the said park service shall, when vested with the control and administration of the park, subject to the advice and consent of the governor of Idaho. My grandparents and great uncle wanted to make sure in perpetuity that the Hariman State Park of Idaho will be preserved and protected without the influence of politics. This is why they insisted that a park service be established and staffed professionally and under the merit system procedures. The current status provides for the governor to appoint the Parks and Recreation Board with the advice and consent of Senate. Therefore, the political branches currently have important decision-making function regarding the Park and Recreation Department leadership. Importantly, and in keeping with the merit-based condition of the gift agreement and with my grandparents, the Parks and Recreation Department under current statute may not be removed except for the reasons set forth in the Idaho Code for inefficiency, neglect of duty, misconduct in office, and his or her no longer being in the district in which they were appointed from. The Parks and Recreation Director under the current statute is appointed by the Parks Board and serves at discretion of that board, and this is under section 67-422 of the Idaho Code. A board is mandated by statute in accordance with the gift agreement to select a director upon the basis of executive ability, experience, and training in park and recreation. Senate Bill 1300 does not change that requirement.
Mr. Dixon, I'm going to need you to wrap up.
Okay.
Time's expired.
Well, let's put it, the original gift was 12 pages long. And what my grandparents wanted was not to be a political entity. If it is appointed by the governor, then that person in a director position works at the will of the governor, not at a professional merit. The other point is that in 2018, there was an attempt to combine 3 departments under one director, including this one, which is exactly what they were afraid of. Averill and Roland wanted to see this kept open for the state in perpetuity, not as a political activity. And this is not the only park they've done. They did a $48,000 acre park in New York, which is run outside of the political system. And this bill would move that and make it a appointment by the governor to work at the will of the governor, and they change every election.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Thank you. Are there questions? Representative Mickelson has a question for you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dixon and Chairman. Did you ever have a conversation with your grandparents or with Governor Smiley about what they wanted for Hariman State Park and why they valued this gift to the state in the way that they did?
Thomas.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Nicholson, yes, to both. I was relatively young. I mean, it has been a few years since then, but my grandparents with my older brother and I explained why they were doing this and not keeping it in the family. And the reason one, they were afraid that if it got into the family, it'd be broken up, sold off, and as my grandfather put it, there would be claptrap A-frames up and down the river. And if you've been over that park, if you get outside the park, there are some of those. And the intent was they wanted to protect the property for the people of Idaho. They had enjoyed it. It's a natural, if any of you have been out there, you know it. I mean, with the moose, the geese, the trumpeter swans, the curlews, that was the reason. They wanted a state park run by professionals. They were very familiar how the Yellowstone Park was run. They had talked to rangers up there, and this is their vision of what would happen. When I talked to Governor Smiley about it a few years later, on our way up to Sun Valley to do the memorial service for Averill, I asked him, what was it like? And he said it was pounded into him that they didn't want politics involved in this. This should be a park run by professionals, managed by professionals, with a board and continuity of management, not changing every other day.
Representative Pahanka.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hariman, real quick, if this were to pass, would the family look at pursuing legal to put it back into the family's name?
Thomas.
To bring it back to the family?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Pahanka. Obviously, the family is going to look at all legal options to keep it the way it was meant to be done. So, that's the best. I'm here representing my grandparents who are no longer with us and myself, and knowing what they wanted. There has been minor discussions with Averill's side of the family, the Fisks and the Mortimers, and I know they're interested. They were very interested in 2018 when we did it, when there was movement. So, yes, there would be an opportunity to look at legal options.
Okay. Any further questions? Representative Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank your family very much for giving Idaho such a beautiful place. And my question to you, is the family worried that the Senate, somehow the governor would not appoint the current director and the Senate would not confirm her?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Boyle, the concern is that it opens up the opportunity for somebody to be appointed, and it would be a political appointee, period. And as I said again, 2018, that was attempted.
Any further questions? Thomas, I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Let's carry that scenario out, that a political person is appointed. I'm going to use for a foil the individual to my left, Representative Scott, gets the appointment. What happens? What's the downside? What's the fear if a political appointee gets that position? Are they going to destroy the park in some way?
Mr. Chairman, the fear is that it'll change every other day, and the person works at the will of the governor, does not work at the will of the park or for a cause of the park, and does not work for the board, which has control of that director. It is somebody that could change every time there's an election or any time that there's a budget change. And if whoever the director is disagreed with the governor, they're out the door. So you don't have the continuity, you don't have a real park professional in there.
Doesn't the board serve at the pleasure of the governor?
But they're appointed on a term of 6 years, I think, or 3 years.
Okay.
And they can't be removed except for the points I pointed out, for inefficiency and so forth. So there is a difference.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Representative Hawes.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification on your question. The commissioners are appointed by the governor for staggered 4-year terms, and no more than 4 can be from the same political party. So that ensures that there's balance on that commission bipartisanly, and they are confirmed by the state Senate.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Next up, Nick. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Nick Fasciano. I'm the Executive Director of the Idaho Wildlife Federation. Standing in respectful opposition to this bill, appreciate the opportunity to testify. So I have a letter here, which I think all of you had, signed by 15 sportsmen's organizations, registering our concerns over this change. Currently, our comments are reserved for the Director of Fish and Game. Currently, the director is appointed by a bipartisan commission, and it is our conviction that we want to keep the department as science-based as possible into the long term. This has nothing to do with anyone who's currently in office or might be in office in the near term, but demographics change. We are looking down the road to states that we have seen where hunting and trapping rights in particular have become materially threatened as the demographics and the political dynamics have changed in those states, and the resultant political influences have taken, they tend to go after trapping first, and then they come down the line when it comes to our hunting rights. I think a lot of us are very open to the conversation of how we future-proof our current system so that doesn't happen to us. But this feels like a step in the wrong direction, and one that could end up coming back to bite us if we're not very careful and very deliberate about how we introduce additional political oversight into the process. We do believe we have sufficient political oversight already through the the governor's appointment and the Senate confirmation of the commission. And if we're going to change that, we want to be very, very careful to make sure that our hunting rights stay intact long term. And so with that, I'll appreciate the opportunity, and I will happy to stand for any questions.
Representative Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you not aware that the Idaho Constitution has in it the right to hunt, fish, and trap?
Nick.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Boyle, yes, I am, and I'm very happy about that. But there are always ways to skirt that to some degree and find ways to make regulations that make it more difficult. And again, currently, I'm not really any concern that something like that would be attempted, but 15, 20 years from now, who knows what could be attempted. There's states around the West where I would not have foreseen what is happening now, and I don't want that to happen here.
Representative Boyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we saw that yesterday in House Resources. It was a rule which exactly was against our Constitution, and you came and testified in favor of the rule and against the Constitution. So I find it interesting that today here you're testifying the opposite.
Nick, would you like to respond?
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Michael Gibson. Welcome to the committee again.
Chairman Crane, members of the committee, Michael Gibson. I'm the Idaho Policy Advisor for Trout Unlimited. I rise in support or in opposition of this bill. I stand with hunting and angling partners who in 1938 created the commission. We've got almost 90 years with that process. It's worked well. We've had great directors. We'd like to stick with that. I'd like to also just point out, thanks to Mr. Dixon for bringing up the issue of Hariman Park. We have over 300,000 members nationwide. I don't think you could talk to one of them that doesn't know about Railroad Ranch and wants to come out here and fish. And we hope that stays in state ownership. We can have all of the legal opinions that we want that says that they can't take the ranch back, but that does not stop them from initiating a lawsuit and having taxpayers have to pay to defend that lawsuit. So with that, I stand in opposition to this bill and stand for any questions.
Are there questions? The only question I have is where to take my young son fly fishing, but we can talk off.
Thanks, sir.
Next question, Jeff Britton.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Jeff Bitten. I am the current president of the Idaho Outfitters Guides Association. I'm here today to stand in opposition to Senate Bill 1300. As outfitters across the state, we all have great relationships with the commissioners that represent each individual district, each individual area, and those 7 people get to choose who is the lead person on the Fish and Game department. Those 7 people are tasked with giving direction to that director, and the director then is tasked with formulating the plans and making those plans take place. The concern from our industry is we need the stability that the current system provides for us so that there is not changes in directors. We also need that director to be able to respond to the needs of the Idaho public, the Idaho sportsmen, which they do through their commissioner. So we really think that the system is not broken. Please don't try and fix it.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there questions for Jeff? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. That's all I have signed up in person, and then we're going to move to virtual. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify on Senate Bill 1300? Seeing none, we're going to move to virtual testimony. First up is Charlie.
Hi, sorry for the delay.
You're fine, Charlie. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Charlie Lanch. I'm a resident of Island Park, Idaho, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of Friends of Hariman State Park, for which of the past 15 years has supported the park through fundraising and volunteer efforts. Friends of Hariman State Park opposes Senate Bill 1300 for 4 key reasons. First, it was clearly the intent of the Hariman family to minimize political influence over the management of the railroad ranch. That intent is reflected in the current director selection process established by the Idaho legislature and has worked for over 60 years. Second, there's a significant legal debate over whether partisan officials can select the IDPR director based on merit alone. Our legal counsel, Kathy Silek with Hawley and Troxel, disagrees with an opinion rendered by Legislative Services, and this conflict is likely to lead to costly litigation if it becomes law. Third, there's an important distinction between directors serving at the pleasure of the governor and one serving under independent board. The current non-political appointee structure has allowed directors to serve across multiple gubernatorial administrations of both parties, fostering stability and constructive relationships with both urban and rural leaders and federal land management agencies statewide. Finally, this proposal isn't new. This has come up in 2009, 2018, and as early as last year had been defeated. And in closing, let me say this. In 1965, the legislature created IDPR and the Parks and Recreation Board in a manner that respected the Hariman family wishes. Their extraordinary gift has benefited all Idahoans, and it is in the state's interest to honor those terms. Let me be clear. Forcing the Idaho Department of Recreation to serve at the pleasure of a governor risks the loss of the state's integrity and the park itself. And with that, I would urge, members of the committee to please not advance State Bill 13 in its current form.
Okay.
And I'm
Thank you,
happy to
Charlie.
take a question.
Charlie, I have Representative Scott has a question for you. Would you yield to a question?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Charlie, I thought I heard testimony about preserving hunting and fishing, but I just was researching online. It says there's no hunting and trapping are generally allowed at Hariman State Park. Is that correct?
That is correct. The state park is also a designated wildlife refuge, and it supports. It's a vibrant habitat for migratory ungulates, for grizzly bear, for elk, deer, swans. It's a wildlife refuge and a state park, and there is no hunting allowed in Hariman. It's surrounded by public lands that do allow hunting, and it actually produces a lot of big game opportunities for hunters out around the park. But inside the park, there's no hunting. It's a wildlife refuge.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions for Charlie? Seeing none, thank you, Charlie, for your testimony today. Allison Brown will be next. Welcome to the committee, Allison.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, that's a little delay there. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Allison Brown. I'm speaking on behalf of the Henry's Fork Wildlife Alliance and as a citizen of Idaho, respectfully opposing Senate Bill 1300. This bill is not just an administrative change. It fundamentally alters how Idahoans have chosen to manage their fish, wildlife, and public lands. The authority of Idaho Fish and Game Commission to appoint the director of IDFG was not created lightly and was established by Idaho voters in 1938 after decades of frustration with politically driven wildlife management. Through a citizen-led ballot initiative, which passed by an overwhelming 78% majority vote, Idahoans made a clear decision. Fish and wildlife would be managed by an independent, nonpartisan commission, not by shifting political powers. The structure has worked for nearly a century and still stands today, despite multiple attempts to overturn it, the last in 2018 with failed House Bill 496. The structure insulates wildlife management from election cycles, prioritizes science and expertise, and builds public trust that decisions are made for all Idahoans. In 1963, lawmakers debated whether a parks agency should answer directly to the governor, but ultimately rejected that approach in favor of an independent board model when creating IDPR in 1965. That was House Bill 138. That decision reflected a clear policy choice for professional, nonpartisan management, one that SB 1300 would reverse by placing director appointment in the hands of a single elected official. Even the perception of political influence can erode public trust. And when it comes to managing wildlife and public lands, resources held in trust for all, public confidence is essential. This isn't about any one governor or administration. It's about preserving a system deliberately designed by Idahoans to endure beyond themselves. I urge you to respect that legacy, protect the independence of these institutions, and not pass Senate Bill 1300. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Allison. Are there questions for Allison? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. The final person I've signed up to testify is Matt Borg. Matt is via telephone today. Matt, we're going to try and see if we can make this work. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, Matt.
Perfect. I got on the phone today instead of Zoom because I got kicked off several times on the HAC committee stuff on those bills. So let me try it here. So I'm Matt Borg with the Eastern Idaho Houndsman Association and the Idaho Sporting Dogs. Our current system we have in place in Idaho right now works really well. It is science-based and follows the North American model. Our current system is the envy of a lot of states. Where other states like New Mexico and Colorado have been overrun by out-of-state money, the influence of environmentalists, ballot initiatives, and bans on hunting and trapping. This is taking away from our sportsman's heritage and is tipping the scales where our big game animals will be out of balance. This bill is unnecessary and will harm sportsmen, houndsmen, trappers, and shooters with future administrations. We need to be smart, guys. We need to keep Idaho great and stay with our current process we have in place. It's all about that balance and backed by science. I was a HAT committee member. I listened to Representative Boyle's comments there. That I was on that committee. I spent a lot of time. There's a lot of key issues here, and some of them are not hard. Some are not as easy as a lot of people would think. And I think there was a lot of drama that showed up from the HAT committee thing that might have pushed this forward, in my opinion. But it's all about that balance. Right now, we're happy with the administration. We're happy with our governor. What's it going to be in 6 years or 10 years? You look how fast Colorado switched the other way. It's dangerous in a lot of ways. Now, we understand that. We live in Idaho, but we've got a lot of people moving in here. And I've worked pretty hard with a fish and game director for the last 30 years, a lot of different directors.
Hey, Matt, your time's expired, so I'll need you to wrap it up.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
Stand for any questions. If anybody
All right.
has any.
Thank you, Matt. Are there questions for Matt? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. That's all I have signed up to testify. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify on Senate Bill 1300? Seeing none, Senator Okonowitz, you can come and wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. There were, a number of things that we could talk about, I suppose. I don't want to waste the committee's time, so I'm going to try and pare down some of the comments. But first, one of the things I kind of thought about was part of my research with all of this, I looked to see what other states were doing, and essentially 75% of the states in the union are structured in the way we're talking about in Senate Bill 1300. So we're kind of the outlier right now. This is the way some of the conversations seem to go. They think that the sky's going to fall. The vast majority of our agencies are structured this way. Our government runs pretty darn well, by and large. So I don't want the committee to be concerned that, suddenly these agencies are going to go downhill. In fact, I think they'll get better. There was one of the folks called in was talking about kind of the creation of the two agencies and how they came about and, why they came about the way they did. And, there's always a little more to every story. But both of those agencies, Fish and Game and Parks, were organized in the way they were, in large part due to the circumstances they had surrounding them at the time. And one of the circumstances they both had, though at different times, were the creation of federal funding mechanisms for fishing, game and wildlife. That one was through Pittman-Robertson, which was created essentially at the same time in the 30s. And then also with Parks and Rec, with the Land and Conservation Water Trust. That, again, being in the, I think it was the 70s, right around the same time Parks and Rec was established in the way it was established. And a lot of the language is similar between the two, and they talk about having professional services and that sort of thing. Well, that was required in order to be able to receive federal funding. So that all kind of came about because of that. Some of this is just interesting, I think, but the Fish and Game, prior to its creation in the 30s, we had one game warden. He was a state game warden for the whole state. Every other employee that game warden hired would be a deputy warden. They were unpaid. They weren't paid by the state. The way they made money was they got half the money from issuing tickets. So every ticket they issued, they got half of the proceeds. Pretty unpopular practice. Resulted in a lot of backlash. And so as far as the change making the circumstances more political, I would argue it's less. It's more open. we're going to see is a more open process on the interviewing and appointing and confirming. I would challenge myself, but you guys as well. How many of the directors of these agencies do you actually know? They're the ones hiring and firing these people. And by the way, the notion that the governor would come in and suddenly be able to fire somebody tomorrow or whatever, these boards have that ability right now and have had that forever. There's no safety net for these directors today relative to their reporting structure. Their boards they serve at the pleasure of those boards today. They can be fired today. So that doesn't change. And we're not going to see this isn't some push to get rid of people. This is merely a push to do things the right way. I stand on the side of the founders on this one. And I think it solves a lot of the problems that we see, a lot of the conflicts that we get with these departments, because they tend to function a little more autonomously because they are, and they can. And I think this will help correct that. I don't see any sea changes coming from it, but I do think it will improve the relationship between these agencies and the legislature specifically. All of this I find very interesting. I've spent a lot more time studying this than you all, so I don't want to bore you with any more. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Senator Okonowitz. Are there questions for the senator? Representative Hawes.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for being here today, Senator. I've been sitting here listening to the testimony and listening to your opening remarks and what you've just said now. And the question rattling around in my head is, what problem are we trying to solve? I heard you just say, we don't like the autonomous functioning. Is that the problem?
Senator Okonowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hawes, I would say, I'll give you an example, and I've got others, but I'll give you an example. When I was newly elected, I was a member of the House of Representatives, and I sat on the Resources Committee. At that time, Idaho was the last state in the union to have not legalized lighted knocks and expanding broadheads. Now, that has to do with bow hunting. The knock is the part that goes on the string. It's the little U-shaped deal. Technology exists for those to be powered by a small battery and be lit with an LED bulb so that you can find your arrow more easily. Expanding broadheads do what the name suggests. They expand on impact. Well, members of the legislature had been asking Fish and Game to incorporate that rule. By rule, add this hunting tool. And Fish and Game refused. So that's an example of sort of extending their policymaking, extending into our policymaking area. It's the beginnings of that. We make policy, we set policy, they implement. And by not doing that, it was kind of the first step into ranging into our policymaking territory. Then Representative Mitchell brought a bill to make it law that Idaho would allow lighted knocks and expanding broadheads. The agency came to our committee hearing and fought tooth and nail to try and stop that bill from passing. Again, we're just doing our job. We're making policy. We're listening to our constituents. We're the last state in the union that doesn't have that. They're coming in saying, we don't want you to do it. They had some arguments as to why. But at the end, when they, I think, realized that they were losing the committee, the deputy director at the time said, at the end of the day, we don't think this is a decision that properly lies with you. We think it more properly lies with us. I was a brand new representative, and I found that to be, well, somewhat offensive and very wrong. We set policy, they implement. So that is an example of encroaching, in my view, on policymaking. And I think that happens with these three agencies more than with the others. And I have sat on the germane committees for those three agencies ever since I was first elected. So I know I'm not alone in that because I've talked to lots of people who've experienced similar things. But that's an example of the problem, one of the problems that I think will be fixed. I think they will work more closely with the legislature. And when they see something like that, maybe consider a little bit more about, okay, let's put it into rule instead of having to have it sort of forced upon them by law.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. So what and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard you just say is that you want the officer of the governor and this body to be able to exert more influence on the director through the political appointment process so that we can change policy more quickly. Rather than having it exist now where this board that, by the way, is appointed by the governor and then confirmed by the Senate, appoint the director and then determine whether the director is doing a good job. So I don't see any change in the actual structure of what just happened in terms of that example that you gave me changing. It's just that the governor now gets to appoint the director and exert potentially more influence so that things change more quickly when we want them to. Is that what you're saying?
Senator Okonowitz.
Chairman Crane, Representative Hawes, what I'm saying is that the system that the founders envisioned and that we employ for the vast majority of our agencies works extremely well. I would like these three agencies to function under a similar umbrella.
Further questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for the senator? Seeing none, Senator, thank you for your time. Oh, man.
You had a light on, and I had a light on.
It is Friday. All right, here we go. Senator or Representative Mickelson.
So I guess from what I'm hearing that there's a lot of frustration with a specific director. If that would be the correct statement, or if it's with all three directors within those agencies, if that's the problem.
Senator Okonowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Mickelson, no, it's certainly not directed at a single director, and it's not necessarily even frustration with them. I think that the way the system is organized creates these additional frictions. I think it's sort of a natural byproduct of how the system is set up. I've got examples with the other agencies as well, and I've had bills that I've run dealing with for example, the doubling fees for non-residents at state parks, which we put out in, I don't remember, I think it was 2003 or thereabouts. And the director of Parks and Rec fought me tooth and nail on that. And, I worked with her as closely, as I could. And ultimately we were able to kind of come to an agreement and so on. But the way that process worked was another really strong example of how I think sometimes these particular agency heads tend to drift into policymaking more so than other directors.
Follow-up? So I guess my concern, as I look at these three, I have concerns about Hariman. I have concerns probably more so about transportation. Specifically, when you get into rural communities and things, having a 7-member board that is appointed by the governor and has some diversity within that board protects the entire state in that process so that we all have projects looked at based upon true needs rather than political considerations. And I guess my concern, and I'd like you to address it, is how do we not make it so then suddenly the Treasure Valley, because they have the most political power in this body, obviously, because most of the people live here, then suddenly the state legislature, regardless of what the studies say or the transportation studies say, we would suddenly have the legislature weighing in on which roads we want built based upon who needs to make their buddy happy. And so how do we not have that happen in this system?
Senator Okonowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Mickelson, to begin with, it's unconstitutional for us to pass laws, particularly that talk about specific highways and so forth, as far as like putting in a new road and that kind of thing. We're highly discouraged from doing that. Secondly, the board's powers today, Transportation Board's powers today, will exist if this bill passes thereafter. And those powers include are plenary, essentially, in deciding which projects move forward, when they're going to move forward, and how much they're going to spend on them. That doesn't change. The director doesn't get to set that today, and the director wouldn't get to change that if this bill passes into law. The board's, ITD's powers in that respect are intact and would remain so.
Follow up?
Sure.
In my opinion, or my estimation, I don't see the need for a board because you're basically having a board that's appointed by a director and then, or by the governor, and then a director that's appointed by the governor. I would then see no need for a transportation board, no need for a fish and game board, no need for a parks and recreation board, because you're basically saying that these directors should carry out the will of the governor and the body that's actually appointing them. And that's probably my biggest concern with this, and the fact that we're putting all three of these agencies in one bill together rather than dealing with them specifically group by group. So if you could address that.
Senator O'Conowitz.
Chairman Crane, Representative Mickelson, that is exactly not what we're doing. These agencies still, the directors will still report to these agencies. They'll still have oversight of those directors. The only thing that changes is who does the appointment and that they are confirmed. So there's a second look to make sure that these are the right candidates when that time comes. They still report to the agencies. The agencies still have powers for promulgating rules, not the director. The boards, the boards themselves have that power. The boards have the power for budget setting. The boards have the power for deciding to sell or purchase land, not the directors. That doesn't change. All of that stays the same. The only change is that the selection, when it occurs, will have a more public review process and a two-step review process. The natural byproduct of which I think will also be a bit better of a working relationship between the legislature and those folks. But by and large, these agencies are going to function exactly like they do today.
One follow-up question.
Sure.
So who can fire right now? Who can fire the fish and game director, the parks director, and the transportation director? Is that the governor or is that the boards?
Senator O'Conowitz.
Chairman Crane, Representative Mickelson, that's their respective boards. And they can be fired immediately. They're not safe.
Representative Bingham.
Just to follow up that. Sorry.
I've given you plenty of questions here. We do have other members that have questions as well, and I've already recognized Representative Bingham.
Just for a comment on the motion.
Let's hold comments. Let's
Yeah.
get his questions, and if he needs to get out of here, he can. Representative Church.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good Senator for being here. It's hard to square these two things. Either things are working really well right now and nothing would change, or things are not working well and we have to change things. So if the governor already, with the Senate confirmation, appoints every member of these boards that then oversee these directors, and there are issues, which you indicated at least with one of the agencies, with the ability to get policy done quickly, is not the problem with the boards who would then oversee the director and be really the guiding force, as you said, for all decisions within those agencies?
Senator O'Conowitz.
Chairman Crane, Representative Church, no, I think what I've said earlier and what I still believe is that the structure is a problem. And we have other boards and directors who are all appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. So not just their boards, but the directors as well. And those agencies function fine as well. So this is not novel. It's something that's already being done in the state. I'm not really sure how else to answer your question.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the list here, Senator, and the only one that I can see, and maybe I am wrong, is the Department of Water Resources and that board. Otherwise, it's pretty laid out that the governor either appoints the director or head of an agency, but not the board, or that the governor appoints, with, of course, the confirmation of the Senate, the members of the board, but not the director. And, to the, kind of point made earlier, conflict in our system is kind of the whole point of the American, democratic experiment. So maybe speak to that about, what other agencies have both the director appointed by the governor and the Senate and all their board members appointed by the governor.
Senator Okonowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Church, Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Education, and Pardons and Paroles come to mind.
Follow up.
The Department of Education?
Senator Okonowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Church, that's right. Jen White.
Any further questions? Representative Mickelson, do you have a question? Did you have, I cut you off earlier. Did you have a question?
No, so I just want a clarification. It was just so then if this bill moves forward, then the boards can't fire the director, just the governor can fire those directors. That was all the clarification I was asking.
Senator
for.
Okonowitz.
Chairman Crane, Representative Mickelson, that's correct.
Okay. All right, any further questions for the senator? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. Appreciate it. Committee, we do have a motion to send Senate Bill 1300 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Representative Bingham, comment?
Mr. Chairman, for comment on the motion.
Certainly.
I'm trying to figure out what problem we're trying to solve. Currently, the governor appoints the board then appoints the director. And if the governor was not happy with the director of a specific department, he could change the board. So right now, we have 7-member boards. There's 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats on each board, and they are throughout, as has been stated, they're throughout our state. And that gives representation for the entire state. So I think if you go back, so I've got the journal from January 8th, 1963, and this is when the ratification of the Hariman State Park Agreement happened. In that, at the time, it says, by the State Affairs Committee and Act, it says, creating a Bureau of State Parks and Recreation Areas, authorizing appointment of a director thereof, and providing that the director and personnel of the Bureau shall be chosen on the non-political and non-partisan basis of merit and for special training and skill. Okay, so this was moved by Senator Murphy, and this was Governor Smiley was the governor. Okay, so in this ratification for Hariman State Park, it talks about the establishment of and maintenance of a professionally trained career merit-based system service. It goes on to say in this agreement, it says, for these reasons, we should accept the park, but as I said in my earlier address, I do not think that we should accept the gift unless we are willing to accept it for the purpose and in the spirit in which it was given. Going on later, it says, said bequest, devices or instruments of conveyance may be conditioned so that if either E. Roland Hariman or W. Averill Hariman or their respective executors shall severely or jointly in his or their uncontrolled discretion determine that said prohibition has been violated, this contract shall thereafter be null, void, and of no effect, and any and all property therefore devised, bequeathed, or conveyed pursuant and hereto shall, upon the termination of all legal life, estates provided to herein revert to E. Roland Hariman and W. Averill Hariman or their respective estates, if either of them shall be deceased at the time and of such determination. So in there, it specifically says we should not accept this gift unless we are willing to go forward with the spirit in which it was given, and that if we violate that it will return to the family or their executors. Mr. Dixon has spoken here today that he feels that SB 1300, Senate Bill 1300 violates this agreement. So what's the benefit and what's the cost? So right now, we are asking that the governor appoint both the board and the director. The founding fathers believed very specifically in the separation of powers. We don't want to give too much power to the executive branch. So if we're giving the governor the authority to appoint both the board and the director, are we not giving too much power to the governor? And at what cost? As they have said, there is a a good chance we could lose Hariman State Park. Hariman State Park is in my area. It's just north of where I live. It's a beautiful park. It's a great place to hike, cross-country ski, trail riding, dirt biking. It's a fantastic park, and I would hate to see us lose it. And so I guess I just don't understand what the benefit of appointing a director is at the cost of losing Hariman State Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Will that debate in opposition to the motion? Representative Hawes.
Thank you, Chairman, for a comment on the motion.
Certainly.
I didn't hear anything today that convinced me that the process we currently have is broken. Right now, as the good lady says, it's balanced. We have the appointment by the governor of the boards with confirmation from the Senate, and we have those people on those boards representing the 7 diverse regions of our state. That's critical. And then the board gets to appoint those directors. The board gets to decide if those directors are not doing a good job and not following not only a particular region in the state, but representing the interests of all of our regions. The members of those boards have staggered terms, something that I mentioned briefly in my question to the good senator, but those staggered terms are really important because they don't correspond to any particular gubernatorial election. If we change the system and we have the director now corresponding to gubernatorial terms, then we fundamentally change how these boards work in actuality. The good senator told us that, in his opinion, the structure is a problem because it creates friction, sometimes, between what the legislative body may want to do with changes in the law and what are the opinions of the directors flowing from those boards on those particular issues. Friction is what we work for in our system of government. It's what helps us ensure that we make good decisions, reasoned decisions. The good senator also mentioned, though, that even if we made this change, agencies can still make rules, right? I've consistently seen in my short time in this body that we are consistently and regularly pulling into our statute rules and making it part of our actual laws so that we have more control. So I would posit that that's not actually the balance that he argues exists. Directors, by design, in these particular areas have some buffer of the pressures of the governor, the elected office, and of this legislative body. That buffer is important. It allows them to make independent decisions that aren't so influenced by politics. We should want that. That's what every single person who testified today told us, overwhelmingly, that they want that. Friction is democracy. We shouldn't be seeking to eliminate it so that we then have what one of the testifiers said, the perception of political influence that erodes public trust. Seeking friction in important decisions is not a negative. I ask you all to consider that carefully. We don't want rubber stamps.
Thank you, Representative Hawes. Representative Scott, I'll take that in debate in opposition to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm getting a lot of emails that say keep politics out of wildlife management, and I just want to say everything's political, and I think that's a big reason why it's really good that the Director of Fish and Game is put through this process. I personally believe that the Fish and Game has been hijacked by environmentalists, and I think you can see that in how we have to fight them to get bills passed. It shouldn't be, they should be looking out for the interest of the hunters and fishers in this state. And I believe, I had a call from up north from one of my Fish and Game guys a couple years ago who said, how bad would it be if we team with this environmental group? We have a big grant we can get for funding if we just do X, Y, or Z. And so there's a lot of money that comes through that sector. And I think that this is a much better approach to how we're currently doing it. So I would urge you to vote for this. And I see all these other directors that were doing it the same way in all these other agencies. I'm not sure why there were some agencies that didn't get put in there, but I think this is a good bill, and I appreciate the sponsor bringing it.
Chair will rule that debate in favor of the motion. Representative Boyle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I see that this bill does is just align what we have with all the other agencies. This is the check and the balance of our Constitution. So the governor appoints and the Senate confirms. Some of the other boards I've been looking at, some other agencies that have boards where the director is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate, Water Resources, DEQ, Pardons and Parole, SHPO, and the State Board of Education. I'm sure there's others as well. I don't see that this bill is going to destroy anything. I think it will actually strengthen. So I'm totally in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Boyle. Representative Skog?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am here just long enough to remember the lighted knocks and expanding broadheads issue, and that still sticks in my craw, what happened there. So, and by the way, appreciate testimony from all sides, personal privilege. My father was a janitor here when Governor Smiley was here, and they used to sit pop and talk policy in his office. I was like that story. He's a great governor. But I'm looking at the legislative research, and I've relied on our legislative researcher, attorney, many times. She has never steered me wrong, and as an attorney, I have to look at this, and as judges, each of you have to look at these different opinions we've received. And I side with her opinion. That's about 8 pages. It makes sense to me. I don't think this will do any harm to Hariman State Park, and I wouldn't vote for it if it would. So with confidence, I'm going to be a yes on the motion.
All right, further discussion on the motion. Representative Mickelson?
You know, I appreciate that we have some specific problems with different agencies, and there's no question that probably exists. But I do have concern, especially when we're talking about such a prized jewel in my neck of the woods with Hariman State Park. And I also have a lot of concern when it comes to transportation issues, because I've heard, the legislature can't, make roads in certain areas, yada, yada. But I know just a year ago, that was the case. And by having a 7-member board that's appointing the director of transportation, we get that balance between the urban and the rural areas of this state. And we get the balance that we need to have the lesser known parts of the state that may have specific problems, have those acknowledged. But when we take away, basically these boards are just supposed to be kind of like, and I've served on boards where it didn't really matter, because at the end of the day, then the director gets the final say. And so what's the purpose of anybody spending time on a board if at the end of the day, the director is the one that gets to make all the final decisions, and that board really doesn't have the power to make those decisions? So I will be a no against this bill. Not that I don't believe that there are problems that probably need to be resolved, but I don't think that this bill, lumping them all three together rather than taking them one at a time, is the way to go. And so for that reason, I'll be a no on this.
Thank you, Representative Mickelson. Representative Church, you want to bring us home today?
I would like to go home.
I meant the debate, so we got 2 more issues, and we've got about 22 minutes.
I'll make it really quick.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to kind of talk a little bit more about what Representative Mickelson said. I think that there are 3 very distinct agencies here, and we're lumping them together. And all I have heard is that there's an issue with one, which operates very differently than the others. I mean, for example, we have heard a lot about the Parks Department, and I'm looking at the powers of the Parks Department. It says, that the director shall be bonded as required by the board and shall perform the duties, that are presented by that board. So, what's the problem there? Also, I see with transportation that, they would be determining their own compensation. So we would have governor appointees, and then they would be able to determine their own compensation. So no friction there, and I think that could become an issue. And then all of these directors, it said, shall have no other public office nor any affiliation with a political party or political organization. And so I think we're really going to put the governor in a sticky wicket to try and make sure that these directors have no, political affiliation or have served as, in a public or in a political party organization, which means that, back to the original issue is that we are creating problems for the future rather than solving one, which I still don't know what the problem is that we're trying to solve. I just see a lot more issues from doing this with these three without fully considering compensation, politics, et cetera, rather than solving any particular problem, which we still have not been able to articulate as it relates to this bill, putting all three of these agencies under this kind of new direction. So I'll be voting no.
Thank you. Representative Church. Representative Alfieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not long-winded, so I will be as brief as I can. The argument we're having here clearly, I think, comes down to that this is not supposed to be a political process. But let's be realistic, folks. Everything is a political process. Who says that this board is not now, any of these boards are not now acting in a political fashion in choosing who the leadership is? I think what we're looking at here is whether the process is going to be a hidden process where the board makes a decision with no public review, or if it's going to be an open process to select these directors. And that is what this bill is about. It is about openness. It is about legislature, which is responsible to the people, getting to review what happens and making that final decision as to who runs that agency. Simple as that.
All right. Committee, we have a motion to send Senate Bill 1300 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Is there further discussion on that motion?
Roll call.
Oh, yeah, there will be a roll call. Don't worry. Chairman was already planning on the roll call. Secretary's going to call the roll.
Chairman Crane?
Yes.
Representative Scott?
Yes.
Representative Palmer? Yes. Representative Holtzclaw?
Yes.
Representative Skog?
Yes.
Representative Alfieri?
Yes.
Representative Crane 12?
Yes.
Representative Boyle?
Yes.
Representative Dygert?
No.
Representative Mickelson?
No.
Representative Pohanka?
No.
Representative Bingham?
No.
Representative Church?
No.
Representative Hawes?
Motion passes 8-6.